Welcome to History for Monday, January 4th. We are going to be reading some in our book about Louisa May Alcott. But we're also going to review a little bit for the quiz and the test because we haven't learned everybody that's on the quiz or the test, but we do want to start reviewing for it some. Okay, the Midwest states will finally be on both the quiz and the test, so let's review the Midwest states. North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. Notice I did show you the names of them because I felt like maybe you needed to see them again. Okay, so do it one more time. North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and Michigan. And don't forget that part up there is Michigan also. Okay, so the next time we review it, I will have flipped it around so you cannot see the names of them. But I just felt like it's been so long since you've seen them that maybe some of you might need to see it again. All right, have your books open to page 214. If you need to pause the video while you find that page, you really do need to be on the page. Okay, so make sure you pause the video while you find page 214. And we're going to read about Louisa May Alcott. Okay, she was in the same chapter with John Greenleaf Whittier, the poet, and they were both in the same chapter together. Okay, such a tomboy. Townspeople smiled as the 6-year-old girl whizzed past them, rolling her hoop around the Boston Common. Such a tomboy that Louisa May Alcott is, remarked well-dressed ladies to each other. These comments did not bother the happy little girl who loved to be outside. The Alcott family. Louisa's family lived most of their lives in Massachusetts. Bronson and Abba Alcott had 4 daughters of whom they were very proud. Anna, Louisa, Beth, and Abba May. The girl's mother, Abba Alcott, was a very kind person. She always had time to sit and listen to all her daughters. She was also very wise. Each daughter listened to her advice and deeply loved her. Bronson Alcott, their father, was a teacher. He had new ideas for teaching children. Most families did not agree with his new ideas. Often, there were not enough students in his school to keep it open. Without a job, it was very hard to provide for his family. Hungry but happy. The Alcotts were indeed a very poor family, but being poor did not stop them from being happy. Part of their secret for being happy was the way they chose to help others. Top of the next page. For breakfast, they could usually afford only milk and bread. One day, their mother heard of a poor family that lived down the street who had no breakfast at all. Daughters, would you be willing to give your breakfast to a family who has no food? They were very hungry themselves, but they cheerfully took their breakfast to the poorer family. The Alcott family returned home hungry but happy. God provides. Winters in Massachusetts were cold and snowy. One winter night, Mrs. Alcott watched the fireplace. There was only a little firewood left. What would they do when the wood was gone? Fireplaces were the only way of heating homes at that time, and fireplaces needed wood. Just then, someone knocked at the door. When the door was opened, there stood a man who had no firewood for his home. I have sick people in my home who need the warmth of a fire. May I use some of your firewood? He asked. Mrs. Alcott knew her family needed the warmth of a fire too, but Mr. Alcott did not hesitate. He gave the poor family their firewood. Later that same night, there was another knock at the door. One of their neighbors had an extra load of firewood. He wondered if the Alcotts could use it. You see, Mr. Alcott told his family, God knew what we needed, and he supplied it. Louisa had keen eyes and a tender heart. She knew how worried her mother always was over being so poor. My poor parents, they always worry about having enough money to take care of us, thought Louisa. Someday I'm going to earn money to pay all their bills. Then I will take care of them. Turn the page. Louisa began to write and began to think about selling her stories to publishers. How happy Louisa was and how proud her family was of her when one of her stories was published in a magazine when she was only 16 years old. That was just the first of many short stories and books she had published. Louisa loved her parents all the more for the willing way they helped others. Louisa wanted to help people too. At that time, many slaves were gaining their freedom by escaping north to Canada. The Alcott home was a stop on the Underground Railroad where slaves traveling north could safely find rest, food, and comfort. During the Civil War, Louisa May Alcott decided to work as a nurse in a Union hospital. She traveled to Washington, D.C. to help care for wounded soldiers. She was one of the many brave women who left their homes to change bandages, feed patients, and read or write letters for the recovering soldiers. But after only 6 weeks, she became very ill and had to go back home to rest and get well. A book about girls. The years passed. By now, Miss Alcott had written dozens of stories which both girls and boys enjoyed reading. Her publisher asked her to write a short story for girls. What? She thought. I'd rather write about boys than girls. Remember, she was a tomboy when she was younger. That gave her an idea. My sisters. Of course, I'll write about my family. And that is what she did. In her book, Anna became Meg. Beth kept the same name. Abba became Amy. And Louisa became Jo. Her own dear mother became Marmee, and her father she simply called Father. In her book, she changed the Alcott's last name to March. What would be the title of her new book? She decided upon Little Women. Little Women was a big success. All who read it realized that this book was about real people. The readers loved it and made Louisa May Alcott's dreams come true. With the money she earned from writing Little Women, she was able to pay all her family's bills and take good care of them. All right, and you can see a copy of the book right there in that picture. That's a very old copy. It's a very old book. Still, you could find it today to read. And on the next page, you see the home, the actual home of Louisa May Alcott. Just about anyone who loves to read will enjoy Little Women. Those who know some of the life of Louisa May Alcott will love the book even more, for they will realize that most of the book is true. It describes the feeling of being poor, the sorrow the March family felt at Beth's death, and the happy times the sisters shared with each other. Later books. Being a tomboy herself, Miss Alcott wanted to write about boys too. As the years passed, she wrote Little Men. The last book she wrote before she died was Jo's Boys, which continues the story of Little Men and tells about the March family in later years. Louisa May Alcott died in 1888, only 2 days after her father's death. She was buried in Concord, Massachusetts, near other famous authors of her time. Although many years have passed since the time Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women, her books are still read by children as well as adults. All right, so Louisa's family lived most of their lives in Massachusetts, just like John Greenleaf Whittier was from Massachusetts. So is Louisa May Alcott. Haverhill, Massachusetts is where John Greenleaf Whittier was from, and Boston is where Louisa grew up. There were how many girls in the Alcott family? 4 girls, okay? Because her family was poor, Louisa wanted to someday earn money to pay all her family's bills. Her first story was published when she was only how many years old? 16. Louisa's home was a stop on the blank where slaves stopped for rest and food. We already learned about this in reading the Underground Railroad. We didn't learn that Louisa's home was, but we learned about the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War, Louisa May Alcott worked as a blank caring for soldiers in a Union hospital. Nurse. The name of Louisa May Alcott's most famous book is Little Women. Little Women is her most famous book. She wrote the book about her own family. Very good. Just like the poem Snowbound that John Greenleaf Whittier wrote was about his family whenever they were snowbound. Louisa May Alcott also wrote about her family. All right, like I said on that quiz that we're going to be taking right after we get back from distance learning, not on Monday, of course, but it's either Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember the details, but I'll make sure I know it before the end of the week. But we'll have a test at the end of the week too. But we will review as much as we can. Right now we can't review everything because we haven't even learned about everybody, but I will ask you some questions and you need to see if you can answer them. Okay, and you need to listen for the answer if you don't know it. Wrote the first American dictionary. Now this was not in this chapter. This chapter was about John Greenleaf Whittier and Louisa May Alcott, but the chapter before this chapter we learned about somebody who wrote the American dictionary, and that was Noah Webster. I hope you remember that. All right, we just learned this today. Wrote the book Little Women. Louisa May Alcott wrote the poem Snowbound. John Greenleaf Whittier. All right. How long did it take Noah Webster to write the first American dictionary? 20 years. And what were the 3 books that you could find in a one-room schoolhouse back in the day when Noah Webster decided to write these books? They were a Bible, a speller, and a primer. Only one copy of each, and the children had to share a Bible, a speller, and a primer. All right. The first American textbook for children, this is what Noah Webster wrote, was called the Blue Backed Speller. Okay? He called it the American Spelling Book, but it became known as the Blue Backed Speller. That was written by Noah Webster. All right, what took almost 20 years for Noah Webster to write? The first American dictionary. All right, what was the name of John Greenleaf Whittier's poem? Snowbound. And who wrote the first American dictionary? Noah Webster. John Greenleaf Whittier also wrote other poems, and they were set to music and used as hymns, to use one of our new spelling words. Hymns, H-Y-M-N-S, hymns. All right, Louisa May Alcott's home was a stop on what? The Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad. And Snowbound was written in memory of the author's what? Family. It was written in memory of his family and the wonderful time they had together when they were snowbound in Massachusetts. Louisa May Alcott worked as a what during the Civil War? We just learned this today. She worked as a nurse during the Civil War. Little Women was written by, what was the name of the person who wrote Little Women? Louisa May Alcott. All right, who wrote 4 volumes of Christian poetry expressing love for God? Some of these were actually set to music and used as hymns, but who wrote them? John Greenleaf Whittier. Who wrote the Blueback Speller? Noah Webster. Noah Webster. And Little Women was written about the author's family. Just like Snowbound was written by John Greenleaf Whittier's family, Little Women was written by Louisa May Alcott's, about Louisa May Alcott's family. All right, you will need to know the books used in a one-room schoolhouse. What were they? Bible, Speller, Primer. You will need to know those for the test. Short answer. And you will also need to know why it was called the Blueback Speller, because he did not, Noah Webster did not name it the Blueback Speller. He called it an American spelling book. So why was it called the Blueback Speller? It had a blue cover. Do you remember that? All right, and then you will also have same Midwest states. Tomorrow when I review with you, I will be turning that over. And we're going to continue and start reading about Davy Crockett and Sam Houston tomorrow. They're also in the same chapter, just like John Greenleaf Whittier and Louisa May Alcott were in the same chapter. So that's two people in one chapter. So this next test and quiz is covering 5 different people. Noah Webster, John Greenleaf Whittier, and Louisa May Alcott, who are in one chapter, and Davy Crockett and Sam Houston, who are also in the same chapter together. All right, see you for science next.